Welcome to the Marmina Cast. Sometimes we talk about fitness, but usually we just talk smack. I'm your host, Mr. Marmina, and let's get on with the show. What's going on, guys? Welcome to an episode of the Marmina Cast where we have totally upgraded just about every piece of recording equipment, or not so much video equipment. I still use my phone, but just about everything except what I just mentioned has been upgraded. This is episode 17. Today we're going to be talking about using a very much objective and non-biased opinion of things with reference to exercise and nutrition. And we're also going to talk about how a lot of the time people just get really offended because everyone gets offended by everything these days. Like we're in this age where, you know, it's really easy to get offended. And that goes for everything, but we are going to talk about it in reference to exercise prescription and nutrition, and how really, like, you really shouldn't get offended. There's just, you know, I won't go too much into it now because I'll spoil the whole episode. But you need to have like a very objective, non-biased, you can't tie sort of like, when I say religious, I don't mean any religion in particular, but, you know, religion is about beliefs. And you can't really use just belief to formulate the backbone for your exercise prescription or your nutrition interventions for clients or your friends or family or whatever, because you deal with the complex interaction between your behavior or somebody else's behavior and their physiology and how that all interacts to create, to augment an effect. And it is almost irresponsible to do so. You need to have evidence to formulate the backbone of your philosophies, opinions, and principles. You can't rely on belief. And we're also going to talk about the application of individualization to program design. And I did talk about this in a video, but I'm going to talk about this in the podcast and really delve into it. Also sent out an email. To all my subscriptees. Is that what you would call them? About individualization and how to apply it, or how we apply it, because it's all my clients really, and how we apply it in here. Because sometimes you get the question of like, why do we all do the same sort of thing in the group session? And I'll answer that. And that's good that clients ask questions, so you should. Like if your trainer comes up and they're like, oh, you know, we do this because it's not a good enough reason. Like we need to have a reason. It doesn't have to be like some magical friggin' reason. You know, it doesn't have to be like over the top, crazy, super specific sort of reason. But there needs to be some sort of method behind the madness. And I think that without that, you don't really have a program, so to speak. You have a mess. Okay, so we are going to talk about how you shouldn't be getting offended by critiques or criticisms with reference to exercise and exercise prescription when you're wrong about something, or when you're definitely when you're wrong. Like a lot of the time, like people, whether it's the low carbs movement or the high carb movement or the low fat movement or the paleo guys or whatever, or ketogenic dieters, a lot of the time people have a very biased, almost religious-like tendency to stick to whatever they're discussing. And it doesn't matter if someone brings about more evidence to this person, or it doesn't matter if they're just totally wrong. Like it doesn't matter if you send them or you'll show them a robust amount of evidence. It's just like, look, whilst this is probably a good intervention for yourself based on a variety of different factors, this is not the be-all, end-all for everybody else, because there's so many different ways to skin a cat, and we are going to talk about that with reference to exercise prescription later. And what I'm pointing to is my notes, because I now have show notes, and now it's a full podcast. Lord Almighty. So that's what I mean when I say you shouldn't be getting too offended. The other day I had actually a fantastic critique on my bench press technique, and I actually bench pressed with quite a narrow grip because of some. And now that I think about it, I do think it's like some pseudo shoulder issues, to be honest. Like, I actually think that I've like noceboed myself into believing that I'm going to have shoulder issues because of the way that I've been taught to bench press. And you really got to like question a lot of that stuff, to be honest. Like, you should always be critiquing yourself and your own technique, but when someone comes along and actually offers you some criticism and advice, you take it, in my opinion. Like, you have to be open-minded, you know what I mean? Like, it's very, very ignorant to think that your way is the right way. Within exercise prescription, if you're looking for like a right way, you're looking in the wrong places, in my opinion, because there is no like right way. Like, I always get asked questions like, what exercises should I do? And I'm like, well, I don't really know, like, I don't know, like, who are you? What are you, what are you doing in my house? No. But like, it is a very impossible question to answer. What exercise should you be doing? I don't know. Let's run you through a screening and assessment. And my screening isn't like totally, it's not complicated. Like, I don't do an FMS or I don't do anything like that. My screening might be like, let's do a squat, let's do this, let's do that, let's do a couple of things that I think are really important for programming, and we'll see how that all goes. And the reason I really don't do an FMS is because, like, FMS is related to the FMS. So you will do a test and you will score on the FMS or any like, so because there's heaps of screenings now, or any like sort of screening, and then based on the program you do, you may or may not improve on your score in the FMS. Whether that is related to anything is up for debate, and a lot of the research suggests that it's really not. However, if you do use it as an objective and sort of somewhat subjective means of evaluating your own movement or somebody else's movement, that's totally fine. I think it's just really important to understand that at the moment the evidence isn't really suggesting that it's related to just about anything, that a lot of the claims initially thought, like injuries and stuff, injury prevention and all that. It's got nothing to do with any of that. But I still think it's a great tool to use, and I still sort of value it to some degree. Anyway, I know a lot of waffling. So like, we've come off a year of people getting very offended by everything. And I really, really thought about this because I watched a very funny Dave Chappelle stand-up comedy show on Netflix, and I love Dave Chappelle. I've been watching Dave Chappelle forever, and that's probably why I'm a little bit messed up, because like, a lot of the jokes are really offensive. They are, but you know what? Who cares? We're not going to talk about comedy, and I'm not really that funny. But I really thought about it, and I was like, this is so much like exercise, because people just crack the absolute shits about, this is the way I do things, and this is the way it is, and this is the way it should be, and all that sort of stuff. But you can't really have that sort of religious tendency and belief tied to anything within exercise and nutrition, because as I mentioned, there's no real right answer, and there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's always grey areas, and it's always going to be like an it depends. I never answer like a question with like, yeah, that's probably like, I'm like, yeah, that's a definite. Like, I feel like personal trainers or any sort of fitness, allied health professional, fitness enthusiast or whatever, we are like Jedi or Sith, depends. And we should never speak in absolutes, although that was an absolute, and that's a contradiction. But almost always, we should never use absolutes in our with descriptions of our philosophies or with answering questions. Like I said, if someone came up to me and they were like, what exercises should I do? I do not know. I just couldn't tell you. I have like the fundamental basics that I stick to, like squat, push, pull, hinge, core. And you do a vertical and horizontal push and pull. And the same could be sort of said for lower body exercises, like you do deadlifts and squats. One's like a vertical pull, one's a vertical push. Then you got like horizontal lower body push with bridges. Yeah. There's a lot of ways you can really do it. And me just getting confused there should show you that, like, there's a lot of different things you can do and a lot of different ways to justify your means of exercise prescription. even squat, push, pull, hinge, core. I mean, you could throw carry, but core is carry stuff. So, I mean, what about other movements? What about movements outside the sagittal plane and stuff like that? Like squat, push, pull, hinge, core. That sort of just, to me, it sort of just seems like really sagittal plane, uni, or bilateral movements. And these other movements outside the sagittal plane, like in the transverse plane, like a lateral lunge or something like that, they challenge the nervous system in a different way, and they can be quite challenging for people. Are they good exercises for strength and hypertrophy? Well, any exercise is a good exercise for strength because you're going to get stronger at that specific skill, and you'll develop superior force outputs in that movement. But whether or not it's a good exercise for hypertrophy is debatable. I think that for the most part, you should probably stick to very basic movements for hypertrophy, stuff that you can not easily do, obviously it needs to be challenging, but things that challenge the target muscle so much. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see, wow, this is a big waffle because this has nothing to do with what I planned, but whatever. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is a lot of the time, people try to challenge themselves, but then the exercise becomes so challenging for everything else that they forget to what they're really training. So a lot of a really good example of this is a squat on a freaking Bosu ball. That's a really good way to get injured for a start, and I actually don't prescribe anything like that. For the most part, in general, if someone wants to get really strong and tone up, what a controversial word, get over it, and be become more aesthetic or whatever, these exercises are not great exercises in my opinion, because they're going to limit the total amount of volume and force that you can produce and augment throughout the course of the program. And harking back to the main contention about everyone getting too offended, you could tell that to someone who is very has almost religious ties to unbalanced surface training, or thinks that the be all end all for core training, or some really out there sort of, some really out there contention, and then you could tell them, hey man, this is what the research is suggesting, and with reference to principles of exercise prescription which apply to a large majority of the healthy population, this is probably not a good idea because of so-and-so reasons, and they'll be ooh, cracking the shits. And that's not how we should approach exercise and nutrition, So with reference to nutrition, especially, like I said before, there's a lot of different diets out there, and there's a lot of different ways to prescribe diets. And that's all well and good. And we should understand the value of every diet intervention, almost every diet intervention, and understand that there are good and bad points to just about every quote unquote conventionally any sort of diet that pushes an increase in lean meat, fruit, and vegetable consumption is a good diet. The only problem I see is that when people claim that these diets are going to cure cancer and rid the world of evil, and I don't know, you know what I mean? It gets really dangerous and stuff like that. You cannot make claims like that when n equals 1. You know what I mean? I've heard stuff a certain diet is going to fix, a certain diet out there fix somebody's MS. And I was like, that's dangerous information, because I've never seen a very solid amount of evidence, a very solid amount of evidence that was robust and accounted and could be applied to in a general sense, to a large majority of the population group in question. And saying that is dangerous in my opinion. You might look at that, instead of going and getting the appropriate treatment from a doctor, you might go and do said diet instead, and then you might not have the same outcomes because this other person said n equals 1. N equals 1 was with this other person. So n equals 1 in research means there's only one person in the studied population group making the exercise, making the study redundant for everybody else. Like, who cares what it means for one person? You need to find out what it means for a large majority of the target population group. And even in that instance, there are going to be outliers and people who respond differently. So it's not always what I'm saying is, like, I'm not ignorant to anecdotal evidence, and I'm not ignorant to n equals 1. Like, yeah, like that, I mean, you know, if the people are similar, or if they have similar circumstances or similar goals or whatever, then perhaps maybe trying set intervention is a good idea. But when we go ahead and claim like it fixes this and does that, it's probably not a very safe thing. Sticking with medicine and seeing a doctor is always the best idea. So, when we talk about nutrition, a lot of the time people do get really butthurt when you come along with some evidence or whatever and you suggest like, hey, this is probably not a good idea. So, or not a good idea with reference to, let's say, this other fact out there. And let's take this instance for example. There is a meta-analysis out there by Aragon and Schoenfeld, which is a fantastic meta-analysis, and it discusses, and a lot of the facts on it are not fresh in my mind, but for the most part, they evaluated like a large amount of, diet archetypes. No. Would you call them archetypes? I really have to go read the study for yourself. Like, find it. Just Google like Aragon and Schoenfeld, like diet study 2017. And it was like they evaluated like ketogenic diets, low carb diets, high carb diets, high protein diets, etc. And when really, the overall contention was that when protein and calories are equated for, and they did like intermittent fasting and that too, when protein and calories are equated for, most of the time, diets are the same across the board. However, there are differences in like the time taken to lose said weight or the means of weight loss. But for the most part, like the mechanisms are very much similar across the board. Like an increase in satiation via protein intake and potential increase in the thermic effect of food, protein being like the highest thermic effect elicitor, I guess you could say. Ew, I have braces and like some food come out my mouth. When you have braces, it's like you have like 50 meals a day. And obviously when you control for calories, this is I say obvious, like not to be an asshole, but we know now, like, and yeah, there are debates about it. Still, there are debates about it, but I am hard pressed to believe that a manipulation in energy intake overall is not the overall governing governing factor in weight lost, maintained, and gained. It is. I have not seen anything to suggest that, yeah, maybe there's something else that we're missing. We probably are. I mean, we're always going to learn stuff and find out stuff, and then hopefully, I mean, you know, maybe one day down the track we'll be like, hey, this was all wrong. And it probably will. Who knows? Who cares? But at the moment, we know that manipulations in calorie intake and arguably protein are very important for weight loss and weight maintained, muscle maintained, etc. And arguably health. Like if you can lose weight and decrease. When I say this, I don't mean that inflammation is bad, but like decrease markers for inflammation when you're overweight, then good chance you'll be a more healthy person. Right? Inflammation is not bad. Like for instance, it's a normal component of exercise, and when we exercise, like the inflammatory. Like the inflammatory nature of exercise is actually part of the exercise adaptation process. So it's like not correct to assume that everything, inflammatory is bad. Like I said, part of adapting to certain exercise interventions is about like producing an inflammatory response. So don't go thinking all inflammation is bad, but being overweight and having a large amount of adipose and inflammatory markers all the time is probably a bad idea. And when you lose weight, these inflammatory markers decrease and levels of adipose decrease, and you are generally healthier. So what I'm saying is manipulations in calories and protein, where you eat less calories and consume more protein, but still within a calorie deficit, of course. Sometimes I've seen some pretty interesting research where they're not in a calorie deficit anymore and they don't gain weight eating 800 more calories. Figure that one out. That's one that still like racks my brain. But it's a very interesting study. So those manipulations are really important for the manipulation in body composition and arguably health, as I mentioned. However, if you talk to someone with very religious ties to a certain diet intervention, it is very hard for you to get this point across to them. Some people just don't want to know. And I strongly urge said individuals to have more of an open mind, because whilst you do have a certain diet intervention that you really enjoy and like, let's say paleo, for instance, because I do want to address some positives of a Paleolithic diet, I do think that there are positives, as I mentioned, pros, to consuming more fruit, more meat, and more vegetables. Of course there are. You're going to be highly satiated. You're going to have a more robust phyto and micronutrient profile, and with that, you're probably going to have better blood lipid profile, etc. overall. So, but I think the biggest kicker here is it's not that it was the magical paleo diet. It was just that you ate more fruit, lean meats, and vegetables. I think one of the best diets would be paleo with the inclusion of grains, and then we have this awesome with the inclusion of grains and milk and pretty much everything I knock out. But just keep the focus on like the lean meats, the fruits, and the vegetables, and then have the rest in whatever fashion you like, provided you don't go over your caloric. I'm giving very general diet advice. I'm trying to defend a Paleolithic diet here, and I ended up giving very general diet advice. So, this is my general diet advice. Eat, the majority of the time, eat lean meats, fruits, and vegetables. Then, not sparingly, don't do this sparingly, add conventionally healthy sources of carbohydrates to your diet that are very rich in fiber. And that includes grains and legumes. You will not friggin' die if you eat grains and legumes. I've posted about it in the past. And grains and stuff are definitely not inflammatory. There's actually evidence to suggest the opposite, that they reduce markers of inflammation. So I'm not sure where all this stuff came from. And you have to understand that just about everything you put in your gut is inflammatory to a certain degree. So these are facts that are just known within nutrition in general. We even had my professor, like someone pull him up, actually someone pulled me up, and I went to my professor and I was like, it's all legit, about the whole paleo thing. He's like, there's no evidence to really suggest what they're saying is wrong, but there's also no evidence to suggest there's also a lot of evidence out there to suggest that what they're saying is untrue. When something is rebutted, and when you have, like I said, when you have religious ties to a certain philosophy or contention, but then it gets rebutted in evidence, you just need to stop it there and go, I was wrong. And especially when it's a lot of evidence, you know what I mean? Like I was wrong about citrulline malate. Like, I really did think that was pretty useless, and beta-alanine. I really did think that these supplements weren't that effective. And yeah, there was some research out there showing that you might have a little more muscular endurance, but for the resistance trainee, arguably muscular endurance, whatever that is. Muscular endurance is... Muscular endurance, obviously when you do higher reps, that's important, but if you are training in the conventional hypertrophy rep ranges, you're not going over, you're not going to go too hard on the, on the reps. You're not going to go so high. 12, 15, it's probably as high as you're going to go. So I was like, these supplements are pretty useless. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, and I was wrong. Not a bunch of evidence, but enough evidence for me to go, you know what, I was wrong. These are some pretty good supplements with the correct dosages, which I've totally forgotten. And you can check out examine.com for all the correct dosages and supplement advice you need. That's my go-to source. Whenever anyone asks me something that is beyond, something that I don't know off the top of my head, I'll just go straight to Examine. They're very unbiased. And speaking of getting too offended, they're a very unbiased source of nutrition and health-related supplement information. And that's the way we have to be. We just have to accept that sometimes we are wrong, sometimes we need to be criticized, and that's totally fine. I think I started talking about this earlier in the episode, and I got sidetracked because that's what I do. But I had a very awesome critique from fellow previous guest on the show, Hayden. But yeah, Hayden was like, look, man, these are a couple of things you could do to improve your bench press technique. And these are things that I know, but as I mentioned, I think I placeboed myself into thinking that I was going to hurt myself or noceboed really, because it's a negative effect. Noceboed myself into believing that I was going to get hurt or do something wrong when I, do bench press in a certain way, which is where I have a wider grip. I thought it was only going to hurt my shoulders because I've heard it does, and I never really gave it a go. And this is something I was wrong about, it didn't really hurt. Actually, I felt so much more in my pecs, and of course, my understanding of anatomy, I knew that, but I was like, who cares? I'd rather save my shoulders. And what do you know? It didn't hurt my shoulders. I was fine. Of course, humans are robust. We can... This is another thing too, a lot of people really fearmonger and demonize incorrect movement patterns and posture and da-da-da-da-da. But you can survive a friggin' car accident. What makes you think that if you sit hunched on a desk all day and then walk over to the printer and then go back and sit hunched and then and do that, what makes you think you're going to have these terrible adverse health outcomes where your breathing's all messed up and your movement's screwed? These concepts are, whilst valuable, I think that they could be looked at in a bit of a different light. And a lot of very intelligent individuals, far more intelligent than myself when it comes to this sort of physical therapy, physiotherapy type stuff, such as Greg Lehman, do talk about how the importance of belief and perception when it comes to movement, and how sometimes our perception and belief can drive our biomechanics and stuff like that. So if you do want to check out any more information on that, you got to check out Greg Lehman. The dude is a brain. That's another thing too. People get way too offended about that. So I'll talk about how I'm I really don't think that that fixing posture and correcting all this stuff is valuable, and people are like, oh my god, what if someone does texts all day and all that sort of stuff? And I'm like, people are texting all day all the time. It's fine, I think that when you put something like that in someone's head, then we're going to have some problems. But I do not think that, I don't think that, certain movement patterns, I don't think anything should be really fear-mongered like food or anything like that, but I think it's very dangerous when you can nocebo someone into believing that they're going to have discomfort or pain. I'm not going to talk about that stuff because it's way beyond my scope of practice. There's my little tidbit. Check out Greg Lehman, Lehman, I think. He's fantastic. So, with everything, you cannot, everything we talked about, posture, food, exercise, you cannot you cannot have these religious ties to certain beliefs with an exercise prescription unless there is a robust amount of evidence out there to suggest that what said individual is saying is wrong. Let's say someone come out and said, hey Mike, protein and calories aren't the only thing that matters with reference to body composition. What about da-da-da-da-da? Here's a bunch of exercises. Here's a bunch of research. Da-da-da-da-da. You're wrong. F you. I'll be like, oh, shit. I'm going to look at this in a different light now. But I think with reference to that, I actually think that nutrition interventions and stuff like that are far more complicated than is made out or a lot of people make it out. That made zero sense. But what we have to understand is that it's not just about, it is calories in, calories out is a huge component of, I just said that, right? And manipulating protein intake. But it is our complex interaction between our food environment and our behavior and ourselves and all that stuff. That is the most important thing. There are 102 different causes for obesity and weight gain and stuff like that. And it is very impossible to tie it down to one. Do you know celebrity chefs are a friggin' confounder for they cause or they contribute. Best phrase to use when you discuss these things is contribute to the development of obesity or contribute to the development of cancer or something like that. Nothing really causes obesity. There are contributing factors that contribute to the development of. That is the best way to put it. But you can't go around saying things like, carbs caused obesity. It's incorrect. That is a flawed concept and flawed contention to argue. There are that many factors and that many confounders that contribute to the development of obesity. All right, so just speaking of the multifactorial nature of exercise prescription and things like that, we are going to talk about individualization and programming for individual differences within a group training structure. I think I'm going to talk about it within a group training structure and just the things I've learnt over the course from when did I really started training like groups, and I'm still learning so much. Like, you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? 2013 is when I started maybe like 2-on-1, maybe like once or twice. 2014, I really trained large groups in a principled and structured environment where a lot of the things we were doing made sense. It wasn't just like a boot camp. Like, it wasn't just like silliness. You know what I mean? Not that boot camps are silly, relax. It's just that I think there are superior ways of going about exercise programming and prescription for the large majority of the healthy population. And this is sort of how we do it. Mostly, I'm not going to give you the answer on like how we do it. I'm just going to talk about why individualization isn't all it seems to be. And, scusi, someone to really listen to talk about individualization is Chad Wesley Smith. He is fantastic when it comes to all this sort of stuff. And I've sort of just got my own spin on it and what I've learnt with reference to training the general population and within a group training structure. So we have to understand that exercise is general physical preparation. It is, for the most part, general. And it lays the groundwork for specific physical preparation. But that doesn't mean that specific physical preparation is like sport specific, and I'll explain that later on. When we use the principle of general physical preparation within exercise prescription, we improve a multitude of athletic qualities such as strength, speed, power, agility, our ability to change direction, the ability for the human body to resist injury, things like that. So all this can be achieved by manipulating acute exercise variables over the course of an annual plan, or with like microcycles, mesocycles, and macrocycles. The microcycle can be, the macrocycle. I said macrocycles because plural. I've seen like 6 to 12 month macrocycles, which is something where I was like, how can you have a 6-month year? But we have to understand that, like, you know, years are social constructs. Like, we made them up, you know. All this stuff is all made by humans. Like, that's why I say to people, speaking of the new year, because we just entered, I'm recording this on the 3rd of the 1st, 2018, and I'm going to publish it on whenever, I don't know. But it'll be a Monday sometime. So happy Monday for those of you listening. But we have to understand that all these things are they're all human constructs. Like, we made them. They're all social, like they're part of our social lives. So that's why I say with New Year's resolutions, you should do things tomorrow or today or right now. Like, who cares? It's a new year. It's another day. Like, it's just a day is made up. Like, we made up days depending on the sun. You know? Just start anything. You know, if you want to apply for a new job, just do it. Like, right now, just jump on the frigging computer and send an email. It's so easy these days. You know, there should be no excuse. Now, where was I? Thank God I have show notes, right? Like I said, there are 6 to 12 month macrocycles. There can be 6 to 12 months. A mesocycle is, God, who knows, 4 to 12 weeks, we'll say. And a microcycle is the 7 to even 10 day training plan. I mean, it could be 7 to 10 days. Like, I know people who program for 10 days. And that's just due to manage fatigue and stuff like that. You can even, look, how many ways are there to skin a cat? Like I said, there's so many. And it's really hard to answer or put into context some of these questions. This is a large discussion. It would be fantastic to have multiple fitness professionals on the table talking about all this shit, but I'd have to buy too many road mics. Oh, another thing, if you ever want to do a fucking podcast, what I would recommend is just investing from the friggin' start. I bought so much bullshit that I would have spent less money if I just invested in all the good shit from the start. Like, this is the bee's friggin' knees. You know, this is good stuff. And it sounds a lot better. It's just way... Like, if I'm over here, I moved away from the mic, and it's still not too bad. Like, I'm watching the little thing. But now I've moved back, and it's friggin' awesome. So just invest. And that goes for your health too. Invest in your health, invest in your fitness, invest in your nutrition. You know, I spend... This is fucked up. And I'm actually a real big tight ass. But you got to be. You know, save for a house and save for growing or facilitating anything I need to in the business, whether it's like equipment or whatever, or covering all the other expenses. But I spend, proudly, $70 a week on friggin'... Maybe not 70... 60, yeah, we'll say 60. $60 a week on glorious Halo Top ice cream. What fantastic. Check it out, you know, like, I had an episode planned and I hope I can still do it in the future. It is, low calorie alternatives to tasty treats, or just low calorie places to eat out. If you do want to see that episode, let me know. You can contact me on Instagram at Mr. Marmina or at Marmina Exercise Nutrition. Or you can contact me via the Marmina Exercise and Nutrition Facebook page. Just look us up and check us out. So back to... this is a waffle, isn't it? Back to individualization. So, I'd also argue that with reference to general physical preparation, training using a mixed methods approach is one of the most important things we can do throughout the macro cycle. And that's because, especially when I was at university, a lot of the research I read suggested that a mixed methods approach used to train this is with reference to athletes and potentially like the general population. Like, I don't see why improving velocity and force and overall power developments, because F times V equals power. Force times velocity is power. I don't see why that's not important for the general population. Training using this approach is good because when you don't train a certain quality, you lose it. If you don't do strength exercise, or if you don't train lower reps, you become less good at lower reps, and that usually means that you're not as strong. If you don't do high velocity exercises, now this is iffy because like training for maximal force outputs can facilitate improvements in velocity in untrained or not very strong people. Once someone gets to, according to the research, approximately 2 times body weight, I think it is, or just over, like, they are going to need to do speed strength or high velocity exercises. However, a lot of the time, I think the risk vastly outweighs the reward for getting to like a 2 times body weight. And that normative data is odd, because 2 times body weight what? So I'm a bit confused, but whatever. And I'm pretty sure it is just like, I think it was a 2 times body weight squat. So let's use that as an example. So getting to a 2 times body weight squat, I don't think it was a full squat. I think it was to a bench or box, because strength is joint angle specific. And I think this research was in soccer players. But look, I could be making shit up right now. So please look it up. And everything I say you should take with a grain of salt, just as you do every other fit pro or everything else out there. Always ask questions. Critical thinking is very important, of course. And we should teach more of it at schools, but that's another topic. So yeah, let's say I was in soccer players. It wasn't to the ground, it was to a box or bench, because strength is joint angle specific. The risk outweighs the reward, in my opinion. I am currently training preseason football athletes, and they are getting mauled in the preseason. Lord almighty, some of the crazy things I'm hearing about what they do in preseason, like 500 friggin' burpees. I'm not even kidding. I'm not making this up. Like, they literally put them through the goddamn ringer. And me, as a strength and conditioning coach, I have to allow for the management of volume and fatigue within my programs. It's very unfair to them that I would put them through more of a ringer. Like if I'm doing very heavy squats and stuff like that, it's probably not a good idea. I've actually cut out, controversial, I've actually cut out a lot of high force lower body lifts even in the preseason, because sometimes these dudes just hobble in and I'm like, do I really want to risk that? So we do speed strength stuff, we do high velocity stuff, we get moderate force improvements through unilateral exercises like a rear foot elevated split squat or something like that. I just think these things are safer, and I'm not training powerlifters. I'm not really obsessed with how much they're squatting. I'm obsessed more so with how they're performing on the field subjectively and how they're feeling at football training. I am a facilitator, and or as Mike Ball would say, I'm a bucket filler, so I fill the buckets. But I mean, that would argue that I'd have to do high force movements because I don't do a lot of that. We did it in the off season, a lot of it, and I still try to get as much of it in as I can. However, the management of fatigue and injury prevention is, in my opinion, the most important factor when we are when I say all this, I mean longevity. I want these people to do this for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? So it is my job and role to improve someone's quality of movement, life, and longevity, and maxing out every week. And obviously you don't max out every week, but like doing really heavy squats and stuff when you've had to do 500 burpees, but you've had to do 250 burpees the day before training, and then you had to do 250 burpees after I train with you. There's only so much we can do. That large amount of accumulation of fatigue puts the risk up a little bit too high, in my opinion, for utilizing like high force movements, like a high or like a heavy barbell back squat for said athletes. And you can totally disagree, but remember, everything is contextual. And like I said, we are getting improvements in force and velocity via other methods. What am I, Mike Tyson? You don't have to back squat, or you don't have to do really anything in particular unless you're a power lifter or Olympic lifter. But if you're an athlete, or let's say you're a physique enthusiast like a bodybuilder, you just do things that you enjoy, the things that do not promote any levels of discomfort. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is that there is also specific physical preparation, and SPP is loosely defined as something that should, quote-unquote, mimic the sporting task. However, you can't go ahead and mimic sporting tasks to a larger degree because this can change or decay the actual sporting movement. So when I say mimic sporting tasks, this does not mean shooting a basketball into a hoop with a heavier ball. That is not specific physical preparation. It's a good way to decay the skill, but it's definitely not going to, it might, but I'm going to argue that it's not going to make you a better basketballer. However, we can mimic the sporting demands of the task, we can mimic the task demands of the sport that you need to perform in a way that is not too much like the actual sport. And another reason why individualization is not all it's cracked up to be is because, those SPP modalities can be applied to a multitude of athletes, provided that the sporting tasks are similar. And athletes within the same sport can definitely do the same specific physical preparation modalities or whatever. Another reason why individualization is not really all it's made out to be is that because it's really hard to find someone who cannot squat, bench, or deadlift, or... Excuse me. What is wrong with me? Or do some sort of variation of those exercises. And whilst it might seem like now I'm really talking about individualization and regressions or progressions of certain exercises based on the individual's, based on the individual's like training age, needs analysis, or injury history, That technically is individualization, but the key point I'm trying to make here is that the demands might be slightly different, but the outcome is probably going to be the same. For the most part, prescribing front, back, and goblet squats, or any sort of bilateral variation of a squat in particular, tends to be pretty similar in the demands across the board. However, a lot of the time it does come down to preference, certain orthopedic individual differences, and that's pretty much it for the most part. I think that because of the general nature of improving these athletic qualities, you can pretty much do whichever one you prefer and still get very similar benefits, provided you don't get hurt and you actually like doing it and you do it for a certain amount of time. There is research out there to show that people doing deadlifts, I think it's, which way was it around? Yeah, people doing deadlifts improved their box jump. And those movements are not in the same movement plane. Like, it would make more sense for them to do back squats and then box jump. But they performed the deadlift and then they improved their box jump. And a deadlift is a lower body pull from the floor, and arguably a box jump is a high velocity lower body push exercise. So they're different planes of movement, but they still had improvements in force output. So even in that sense, so if a deadlift, what I'm saying, if a deadlift can improve a box jump, then so too can obviously box jumping. Like, if you want to get better at box jumping, you friggin' box jump. So too can any sort of squat. I don't think it really matters like a lot of people suggested it does. I've been waffling on for friggin' 47 minutes. Unbelievable. What else are we going to talk about here, ladies and gentlemen? So any sort of change should be implemented intelligently. I think one of the biggest mistakes, as I mentioned, was that a lot of the time, as I mentioned in other episodes or other things, we will just, a lot of the time, like, people will just swap things out because for the sake of it, or to shock muscles and stuff like that. And Brendan and I talked about why that's the dumbest thing to do. So changes within programs should be implemented intelligently. And this is what I mean. Like, you should always have a reason why you manipulated the program and opted for a change in exercise in the exercises prescribed. And it can literally be as simple as something like, I wanted to avoid some training monotony, something like that. There are exercises within the group training structure, exercise and nutrition, that we do not swap out because I think they are fundamental for improvements in hypertrophy. Now, remember, these are general. I'm going to list off a bunch of goals here, and they're general because I train group people in a general setting. It's general physical preparation, these set exercises are really important for hypertrophy, strength, and injury prevention. So swapping exercises out for the sake of it isn't like a great idea. Like I said, like, you need to have like a methodological backbone for why you are prescribing these things in the way that you are. So I think individualization is really like the ability of the trainer to understand how to use the tools in the toolbox that they're given within the principles of exercise prescription to facilitate adherence and progress. And it's because these principles apply to a large majority of the healthy population, and it's the manipulation in these variables that facilitate or that are what individualization actually is. It's not like I get two people and they do totally different stuff. I don't really think that's individualization. If two people come to me and they have very similar goals, and they have like a similar training history and stuff and whatever, then they will probably do very similar stuff. And within a group training setting, like, pretty much everyone does the same thing, with a few exceptions here and there based on, like I said, variety of different factors. I think two very important components of individualization are like there's the manipulation in variables and auto-regulation. So not everyone's going to feel like 100% every single day. So the ability to individualize and auto-regulate the program based on how someone's feeling is really important. lowering the perceived rate of exertion for that day, lowering the intensity, etc., which is like a sub-archetype of, well, vice versa. Like, if you lower the perceived rate of exertion, then you will generally have a lower intensity. And keeping the repetitions maybe the same, increasing the rest time, etc., and just making the person feel good overall. It's probably a good idea if they're not feeling very good. And that's individualization in a sense. Let's say someone feels really shit when they come into the groups. The groups are programmed in a way that people will sort of work at their adaptive volumes. I'm not going to say maximal recoverable volumes, because I don't really want anyone smashing their MRVs every week. That's ludicrous, especially in the general population. So they're working at a pace where they can still adapt and progress, right? And obviously recover, because, hello, how can you recover, or how can you adapt without recovery? So let's say someone's feeling pretty crap. They'll, like, one person will do, maybe 5 sets of 5, and then for a given lift, we'll say trap bar deadlifts, and then another person will do, we'll say 3 sets of 5 within the 15-minute time span they get the trap bar deadlift. And yes, I give them like a certain time, and it doesn't work like a boot camp sort of setting, because, they have a self-auto-regulated rest that they take as long as they need to facilitate, like, obviously the lift. Like, I was going to do a huge episode about it, like the truth about boot camps, and I think I still will, because I'm almost running out of time here. But a lot of the time, like, just focusing on, like, facilitating fatigue is not a good workout. That does not mean you had a good workout. Just because you feel fucking shit at the end of a workout doesn't necessarily mean that the workout was awesome. It probably just means you trained your ass off, and maybe that facilitates calorie burning, but does it facilitate progress? Who the fuck knows? Because a lot of the time these workouts, like, are associated with a lack of data gathering and stuff like that, and we really need, or I need especially, like, my clients, I'll get them to track everything. I'm like, what did you do last time? How much? My group training clients, I get them to track their weights, and I track everything else because it's sort of already, like, built into the program. And then my private clients, I track everything, and that's because I need this objective data to program further interventions so that they continue to progress. What I understand is, how can someone just run amok and just get friggin' tired and sweaty, and then expect to progress? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, you'll burn calories and you'll probably get healthier and probably build some muscle, but you only get so far, and you do really need, like, a long-term plan that facilitates adherence and progress if you're going to stick to an exercise prescription. So, another really important point with reference to individualization is manipulating the acute exercise variables. People who train for a longer period of time will generally be more muscular and stronger, so they will need longer to recover. And people who are new to training probably could train more frequently. Things like that are really important. So the programs don't have to be totally different, but they can be different in this sense. Let's say we're in a group training setting. I'll probably get, like, the newbies doing goblet squats, and the veterans doing whatever variation of squat they enjoy. The veterans will actually get less sets out than the newbies, because the newbies aren't lifting as heavy. They can do anywhere from 5 to 7 sets within the 15-minute time span, and or working sets, by mind you. Like, they'll work up to a heavy one, and I'm like, yeah, that was cool, I could do that again. I'm like, yeah, do it. We could practice the lift, get really good at it. And then the more trained people will probably only, I've had people anywhere from 2 to 5 sets, 2 to 4 actually. 5 is like really pushing it, for my more trained guys, or especially a lot of the guys and ladies. I mean, guys, anyone, you know what I mean? Not assuming nothing. 2017. Speaking of that, don't get offended. Speaking about the first couple of points. So, individualization. is one of the most misused concepts, especially with reference to a lot of the like social media friggin' fitness marketing gurus out there. It's not a reason to sell your $400 fucking PDF. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like buy my individualized program for $400. Whoop, whoop, woo. Yeah, boy. That is not what individualization is all about. Individualization is, like I said, it's the manipulation and acute exercise variables and the auto-regulatory like nature of exercise prescription. It does not mean that you just... And you know what's really funny too? Like, I'm heckling all these Instagram coaches that pretend to administer individualized programs to people, but like, from what I've seen, not going to name anyone or not going to do anything to say anything or whatever, but a lot of the time, like, it's usually just a copy paste, or it's individualization for the sake of it, which in my opinion is just as bad, where they just, like, they're like, oh, the last client I wrote this, so I'm probably not going to write the same thing for this one. What? Why? Like, why? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to individualize a program, it needs to be done intelligently within the principles of exercise prescription. Like, it needs to be smart. What's that? More food. I'm having like 8 meals here. How many times should you eat a day? I don't know. Get braces. I won't take too much more of your time, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I hope it sounds better. I hope it friggin' sounds better. I spent $1 bajillion. Not really $1 bajillion. Actually, it's quite budget. Like, Road and that. Tell you what. Good prices. Good stuff. Invest if you're going to do anything like this. Invest in everything. Like, you know, invest in your health. Invest in your longevity. Invest in your life. Invest in things. It's good. Speak to you in the next episode, guys. TTFN. Ta for now.